So it's my very great pleasure to introduce you to Lissette Ryan. Lissette is new to this stage and fairly new to Storytellers of San Diego too, but she is not new to performing. Welcome, Lissette.
Hello. I am going to tell you the story of the Bairn and the Sidh. There was once a woman, and she was alone in the world but for her wee bairn, and together they were enough. And she held him one day. She walked along a cliff overlooking the sea, and he began to cry, and she knew he was thirsty. It was a warm day, and she looked down to the little strip of beach, and there was a stream leading to the sea where she could collect water. But the path down was really steep and dangerous, and she knew it would not be safe to take him. So she sat down, put him on her lap, and took out her small harp, and she sang him this lullaby. Bahu baliri, bahu baliri, bahu baliri, bahu. Sleep soft, my wee bairn. Sleep soft, my wee bairn. Sleep soft, my wee bairn. In Horben. And his eyes grew heavy and he fell asleep. And she gently set him down under the tree, and she climbed down the path to gather the water. Now while she was gone, two fae happened along the path, two of the Sidh, who stood dark, tall, with their long hair and their pointed ears. And the Sidh cannot make or create for themselves, so they take or collect from others. And they saw the Bairn lying there and looked at each other and said, "What no one claims is ours for the taking." And they snatched him off and took him away. The woman returned and did not see her Bairn when she left him, so she called out for him. But after several moments, her voice grew frantic, and she raced around calling, and she wandered down the path and looking for him. She came to a town, asking all who were there. None had seen them. So she doubled back and went the other way, asking everyone she came across, trying to find her Bairn. She slept a fitful sleep and continued the next day for 3 days looking for him. She finally came to a camp of wanderers, and she saw a lad there and said, "Please help me. I've been looking for my Bairn for 3 days. Have you seen a child?" And he said, "No, but let me take you to my grandmother, for she's the wisest woman that I know." And he led the woman to the center of the camp, where an old woman was sitting by the fire with her white hair plaited around her head and her woolen shawl wrapped about her shoulders. And she saw the look of pain on the woman's face, and she took her hand and she said, "My dear, come sit by the fire." And the woman looked at her and she said, "Please, can you help me? I'm looking for my Bairn. It's been 3 days. I can't find him." And the grandmother took some herbs, threw them in the fire, and sat there for long moments. She opened her eyes and she said, "I ken who took your child. It was the Sidh." And the woman said, "Well, how do I get him back? What must I do?" And the woman said, "When the Sidh take, they do not return. You must give us up, my dear." And the woman said, "I will not abandon my Bairn to the Sidh." And the grandmother nodded and she said, "Very well, my dear, I can help you. The Sidh collect that which is valuable, but that which is rare. If you were to have items such as these, you may see your Bairn again if you go to the Mound of Sheen." And she placed her hand on the woman's head and gave her a blessing of protection. The woman thanked her and left. And once she was exited the camp, she took out the only thing of value that she had, which was just her humble harp, and thought, this is not enough, and she remembered down by the beach there were bones that had been bleached by the sun, so they looked as if they were ivory, and she could use those to fashion something. So she began the journey back to the seashore and climbed down, and as she was climbing down, she saw that some birds had made their nests in the cliffs, and that the feathers were white and exquisite, and she gathered them. And she spent several hours gathering these feathers and went down to the seashore. She took strands of her own golden hair and used them to sew it together until she had a cloak that gleamed in the sun and flowed in the wind. And then she collected the bones, and she put them together and again took strands of her own golden hair and used them for the strings of the harp. And when she was done, she played. And the birds came down for the sky, for in those strings was all her hope and her longing and her love, and the music was irresistible. So with her cloak and with her harp, she went to Sheen, and she waited by the mound until she saw one of the fae, one of the Sidh approaching, and she put on the cloak and she sort of moved a little bit, and it gleamed in the sun and it flowed, and the Sidh wanted that cloak and said, "Mortal, I would have that cloak. What is your price?" And she said, "This cloak, there are none like it in all the world. It is not for sale for any amount of money. But if you were to take me with you into Sheen, I would give you this cloak." And the Sidh wanted that cloak. And although mortals were not allowed in, said, "Very well, I will take you in." So together they entered. In the majesty of the room, it was laden with jewels and she took off the cloak and saw a throne. And whoever was on that throne, she knew would be able to return her Bairn to her. So she approached the throne and she brought out her harp and she played, and the hall was silent. All were enraptured by the music. And the king of the Sidh, when she had stopped, said, "Mortal, I would have that harp." And he motioned. And three of the Sidh came with trays laden with gold. And the woman said, "This harp is not for sale for any amount of gold." And she continued to play. And the king said, "Mortal, I would have that harp for this gold." And she stopped playing and she said, "It is not for sale." And in her heart, her chest was beating like it would burst because she had no power. She only had her desire and her hope and her persistence. And she stood up straighter and she said, "My Bairn was stolen and I want him back." And the king heard the steel in her voice and he motioned. And one of the Sidh came with her Bairn and she set down the harp and she held him. And the king began to play and all were enraptured by the music, but the woman and her Bairn were already on their way to the door. And when they left, they went to the camp of the wanderers. And his return, the Bairn's return, was celebrated as if he were one of their own. And indeed, the woman and her Bairn remained with them. For we are all just wanderers on this earth. But we don't have to wander alone.